Welcome in to Moving the Chains, brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union. I'm Kevin Thomas alongside Jerel Hendricks. We've got a great show lined up today, a very special guest here to preview the 2024 season, and that's Ian Guerin from Prep Redzone and Catapult Sports. Ian, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, we appreciate your time. We really do. If this is you guys' first time tuning in, be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter/X, Instagram, YouTube, and more at Movin Chains, website movingchains.com, and our podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ian is the director of Prep Redzone Carolina and the scouting director for Catapult Sports. He's been covering high school football in the state since 2009. Ian, this is kind of a weird year for our state with football. You go into the reclass where you add in the multiplier, you get 2 5As now and whatnot. Just what's maybe your overall thought about how all that shook out? Did you kind of see the way that they laid it out coming? Were you surprised by anything? How that kind of fell apart there?
Nothing really surprised me the way it ended up. I've been very vocal that a multiplier was necessary in this state. I sent my oldest to charters. I'm a big proponent of what some of them can provide in an academic setting for kids. At the same time, if you've got a different attendance zone that doesn't match the school next door to you, then yeah, there shouldn't be two sets of rules, because the South Carolina High School League, listen, for all of its faults, one of the things that it's charged with doing is streamlining everything to make it as similar as humanly possible. Nothing's ever going to be perfectly streamlined. Nothing is ever going to, come out exactly the way it's laid out to be. But if you're drawing from an attendance zone that's different than the traditional public next to you, you got to have that multiplier. You got to have something to level the playing field a little bit. These small rural schools that are just being crushed across the board in multiple sports. It's just not. It's not right. People like to say fair, but it's not about fair and unfair. It's about right or wrong. And so, I wasn't really surprised by the way that things shook out. Some of the pettiness along the way, some of the adults getting involved in kids' games the way that they was really disappointing to me. We can get to a place of commonality without it becoming petty, without the stone throwing. Because let's be honest here, anybody that tells you that traditional publics aren't seeing an influx of transfers and benefiting from them as well, when some of those transfers are in question too, give me a break. There aren't a whole lot of coaches in this state that are making six figures comparatively. Okay. They can't risk pensions. They can't risk jobs. Okay. They're not openly recruiting. It's not the widespread. I'm as tied in as any non-football coach you're probably going to find in the state. And I can tell you that, everybody's got their systems. There's a reason why certain schools draw quarterbacks from other places. There's a reason why certain schools all of a sudden have a brand new offensive lineman or a new tailback. Success attracts. Okay. Every parent right now who's got a teenager has been told for the last 5 years that the grass is greener somewhere else. And we've got this little thing in our hand to remind us all the time that something over there is better. Okay. Coaches don't have to recruit. I'm not saying that coaches don't. I'm not saying that booster club presidents aren't sending messages on Twitter. I'm just saying that it's not as prevalent as people like to make it out to be about the charters. When I have to update my Catapult database and I have to update my Prep Redzone database for transfers, I can tell you that the last 3 summers, it's been bonkers. Okay. We can't keep up with them. We even had a kid ranked in our system last week when we re-released our 2025s in Prep Redzone. He had transferred 3 weeks prior. 3 weeks. You're talking about 2 days before the start of preseason camp. Okay. It's going to happen. Okay. This is a story that I wrote about for my high school newspaper in the fall of 1996. Okay. The kids are going to transfer. Nowadays, what we're seeing is that we've got the club teams, the travel teams, we've got social media. The world is getting smaller faster. Okay. We're connected with kids from the neighboring school that back when I was in high school, maybe you wouldn't have wanted anything to do with that kid because he had a different logo on the front of his jersey. Okay. Now it doesn't matter. These kids are playing in 7-on-7s together, in travel leagues and other sports. We've seen a lot of influence from basketball travel ball on the football field. Okay. This isn't going anywhere. Okay. But if all we're doing is throwing petty accusations at each other, then we're never going to find that commonality. We're never going to get to that place where we can just accept that sometimes kids are going to transfer. Sometimes kids are going to look at a charter school or a private school or the big traditional public that just played for the state championship and say, wow, I want to go be over there. I want to go be a part of them. They're the only way that I'm going to get that Division I scholarship. 9 times out of 10, that's not the way it works out. We know that. We know that as adults. We also know that if we want to keep going down this path, if we want to keep blocking games and telling people that, we're not going to play you because you've got a different set of rules, even though we've added the multiplier, even though we've created a system of looking at the ADM that balances things out a little bit, then it's just we're going to be having the same conversations in 10 years that we've been having for the last 7.
I guess that's a perfect seg for my next question, Ian. Is there a way to kind of put the toothpaste back in the tube there? Is it a situation where with this transfer situation, people are just going to have to get over it, whether it be the parents, whether it be communities, like you said, administrations at different schools, and the high school league just have it the way it is? Or do they adopt maybe a college model as, it's just fair game and just finish out your season? What do you think is the best option? And how do we kind of end this discussion of talking about the quote unquote transfer portal in high school athletics now?
I honestly, I don't know that too many, I don't know that enough people want the conversation to end. It's like I saw you guys took flack last week for putting out a top 75 Mr. Football. And, you can look at any list, you can look at any topic of conversation you put out, especially in the off season when there's no games, especially when we're not talking about, things during the season and in a kid's getting injured or a team surprising us or a team falling on its face that, has been the most dominant program in the last 11 years in the state. And anything during the season, can be football related. In the off season, people are going to gravitate toward whatever they can gravitate toward when it comes to football. That says something about the popularity of high school football in the state of South Carolina, but it also says something that maybe people just want to complain a little bit. Maybe people just want to find that bugaboo to go after. I can look at your list and I can pick out 15 guys. I'd be like, there's no way in heck that kid's going to be one of the top 5 or 6 for Mr. Football. But you know what? You guys got people talking. You kept people interested. You got a specialist coach in Charleston that's upset that you don't include a couple kickers and punters on there. And I get it, because you have to look at all the stuff that happens in the off season. Okay. You have to look at that stuff as driving the bus when there's no games. Okay. People are going to continue to talk about transfers. They're going to continue to talk about charters. They're going to continue to talk about the 4 private schools that are members of the South Carolina High School League. It's not going anywhere because sometimes people just need something to talk about. Now, as far as coming to that place of commonality that I mentioned earlier, I mean, what else do some of these guys have to do? I mean, they've jumped through the hoops. They've been hit with the multiplier. They're going to get hit with it again. Is it going to stop in 2 years when some of these schools just realize, well, if we're getting hit with the multiplier, let's maybe open up our enrollment numbers? I mean, those pinnacle schools in the state of South Carolina, they've got a max number of kids that they want to get. It's not for the reasons that most people think. It's because of that. That's where the money comes from. There's a sweet spot when it comes to enrollment numbers. Okay. Yes, there are people in some of these charter institutions that want to, build these athletic powerhouses and they want to dominate, like some of them have in certain stretches in certain sports, but at the end of the day, it's about, following the dollar bill. They have a sweet spot For a while there, their sweet spot happened to line up with the classification that would give them the best success. Well, that's no longer going to happen. It's no longer going to be, and I don't want to say the word easy, because that's disrespectful to the coaches and the athletes at those schools who work their butts off just like everywhere else. Okay. But it is going to be a little bit more difficult now. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for some of them to compete on the 3A, 4A, 5A levels. You know, we're about to see some teams that were really, really good last year, probably about to struggle. You know, maybe people just need to see that proof. Maybe people just need to see the evidence that, okay, look, we did what was right. We installed a multiplier. We made these teams play by a closer set of rules than the traditionals are. Okay. Maybe we just need to see a couple of them not play as well, and that'll maybe kill the conversation a little bit. It's not going to kill it entirely. This probably isn't going anywhere, because no matter what, from the 4th or 5th day of December until the 3rd week of August, we got a whole bunch of free time with no games.
Yeah, let's take a look at maybe some on-field action now. Start maybe at the 1A ranks. Yeah, it's really funny. You talk about the multiplier with 1A. You lose the 2-time defending state champ. All the private schools get moved up. And on the flip side, you get big bad Abbeville comes down to 1A. So I'm sure the 1A coaches are loving that. I mean, just from the outside looking in, doing some preview shows we talked about, we think Abbeville is really good. We like Blackfield Hillsdale. We like Lamar. There's some really strong teams there, but is it fair to say that it's Abbeville's to lose at this point?
Yeah, I mean, if I think those 3 teams that you listed right there have to be leading the conversation. I think the fact that Lamar is an upper state team now makes things, a lot more interesting. Look, Abbeville, when we started looking at the numbers of what the multiplier was going to do by moving those Greenville privates up, it was almost set in stone that Abbeville was going to have to move down. So there's been a few of us, from here to the upstate talking about what that was going to mean. And I mean, Abbeville's got some Division I talent. They've got history. They've got legacies. They've got pedigree kids whose, dads and grandfathers played at Abbeville. There's tradition. I mean, that was one of the very first stories I had to do in 2004 when I moved here. I was covering the Gamecocks for the Anderson Independent Mail, and I would help out on high school coverage, and they sent me down to Abbeville. And, here's this kid from Kansas who had never been to South Carolina, until about, 5 or 6 weeks prior. And I'm looking around like, wow, this is a small school. Like, you could see the Abbeville insignias on storefront walls, going around, town and everything. That was my eye opener. And so, now we're talking about 20 years later and we're still talking about Abbeville. And it's just kind of like, this is what a powerhouse is, as far as Blackville Hilda goes, man, everybody talks about Jaquel Hallman, man, they got dudes everywhere. I mean, they're out there winning track state championships and relay races, and they have size and speed that most 1As aren't supposed to have. Lamar, I mean, you put Lamar in, a number of different regions or classifications or upper state, lower state divisions, they're still going to be successful. I mean, they've got a coach who understands that he's in a lot of ways playing with house money, because of some of the guys that he has playing for him are they don't look like 1A football players. Kendall Walton is 6'5" and 295 pounds and ran 19 miles an hour in one of our combines in the spring after doing it at a combine in December. And I'm not talking about somebody standing out there with a stopwatch. I'm talking about a Catapult GPS vest on this kid. People that size are not supposed to move like that, and he's, now Stephen Burris, the coach out there, has got a left tackle who's also going to play a little bit of defense. He's got a couple of guys that are small by comparison, but they can move. You get somebody who can move out in space. It doesn't matter how big they are. It doesn't matter. I mean, they can outrun everybody on the field with them, which is what a guy like Zoom Jackson can do. You know, I didn't even know his name was Xavier until 3 months ago. I've been calling him Zoom for 3 years, you know, and it's because it just fit, you know, it just made sense. So, you know, I think those 3 right now are probably, they have to be at the top of your list in 1A.
Ian, let's just keep going. Let's jump up to 2A. I know you've probably heard, like we have, nothing but great things coming out of Chester right now. It seems like they're kind of going to be the team to beat there, but also some other contenders. You got Clinton, Strom Thurmond, Shara, Barnwell, just some, you know, some teams that you really are excited to talk about when you're talking about 2A football in the state of South Carolina. And then trying to stay away from the transfer in the charter school conversation, but you had two charter schools playing for this state title last year who have moved on. It's going to be pretty cool to see, you know, someone else win in this class.
Yeah, I mean, Chester is who I voted number 1 overall in the class. I mean, they've got 2 guys that were, you know, they were on our preseason, you know, all-state team that we did with Prep Redzone, you know, and I figure there's 7 of us, you know, kind of quote unquote voting, discussing, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, for a 2A team to have a couple guys, you know, but, you know, they've got so much talent that people forget that Trooper Floyd is the quarterback there. You know, it's like, here's a kid who's been, you know, starting for 3 years. Obviously, is, you know, as a coach's kid is going to know every inch of that playbook. I mean, you can win a lot of games that way. You know, another team that I think is, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm looking at more of a, you know, the drone shot above the state. Seems like a lot of people are forgetting about is Clinton. You know, Clinton is going to be really, you know, really good. And yes, I'm going to apologize now. I did say Clinton the first time I said
Get that T out of there.
I apologize. Well, you know, when we took our son up to start school and we drove through, you know, my wife and I had this big conversation about it's Clinton, not Clinton. And she goes, "There's a T I know how to spell." And, you know, I'm like, oh God. Oh man!
Don't say that out loud. All right,
it's irrelevant.
No, it's on you know, camera now. You guys can try to drag her all you want. Trust me, you're going to want to just stick with me. But yeah, I mean, there's, you know, having Gray and Oceanside move it out of 2A, you know, it does open things up a little bit. I mean, you got, you know, teams like Saluda and Strom Thurmond that are always kind of in the picture. Down in the lower state, you know, you've got Barnwell, who, you know, when I was looking at everything after the finalized, you know, classifications came out, I even sent the Barnwell coach a text and I said, you got to be one of the top 2 in the lower state. And, you know, he tried to play it off, you know, make everybody else sound like the Green Bay Packers, but, you know, they've got some guys. I mean, Cameron Austin's going to go play college baseball, you know, somewhere. I mean, he's possibly looking at this as the last time he's ever going to touch a football again. You know, this kid went for 2,000 yards last year. You know, he's really good. And he showed up to the combines in March and just, I mean, it was like he had a fire underneath him. You know, you put a guy like that with some of the players he's going to have around him. I mean, they're going to be good. Timberland, obviously, everybody knows about Desmond Green, you know, Philip Simmons, you know, they lose the big running backs, but they've got plenty coming back. Their line is big. They've got a 3-year starter at quarterback. You know, one of the teams that I think, or one of the regions that I think is going to be really interesting is that Region 7. You know, I think you've got Kingstree, you've got Manning, Marion, Lake City. You know, Lake City's, I mean, look, this time last year, we were all talking about Lake City is this really just heartfelt story about everything that happened with the bus wreck. You know, one of the kids that was on that bus had to miss all of last year. And I wrote something about him the other day. He's going to be coming back. You know, this is a kid who, you know, at the time of the accident, you know, we were getting ready to move him into our rankings because of everything that we saw. This kid, if you looked at him, I mean, if you put a Dutch Fork jersey on him, he'd look like he was right where he was supposed to be. You know, so, you know, we've got, you know, I think everybody talks about teams too, but I think taking Gray and Oceanside out of Class 2A, I think that also helps elevate individual players as well.
I do want to ask this maybe kind of a combo 1A, 2A question here. Looking at it, it looks like both classes are pretty leaning towards the upper state. Maybe have the favorites in both. It seems like, you know, 1A, you throw in Louisville as well as upper state team there. It's like lower state, maybe Bamberg's Toulouse. And then the 2A ranks, I'm high on Barnwell. Actually going to that Barnwell Blackville Hilda game tomorrow night. Really high on those guys. But outside of them, there's a lot of, unknowns. Are there a couple teams? I know you mentioned Philip Simmons in 2A, but in the 1A and 2A ranks in the lower state, you think could make some noise and really challenge some of these upper state guys?
Yeah, Bamberg Earhart would probably be number one on the list in 1A. Bamberg's got a kid named Marcus Can who, Marcus is good now. And Marcus is, one of the young dudes on the team. He's going to be playing receiver. He's going to be playing running back. He'll be playing some DB. He's going to be helping in the return game. This kid's got all state written all over him. Got a, pretty good quarterback who I think some people have heard about. Got a pretty good defensive lineman that, blew up at the combine again, in Region 6. You've got, very similar to the Class 2A region on the Grand Strand and PD. You've got, 3-4 teams there, and Carvers Bay, Johnsonville, Lakeview. Latta lost a lot, but, I think they've kind of understand what it takes to win. Hannah Pamplico is bringing back a running back who 2 years ago ran for 2,000 yards. Baptist Hill is one of those really interesting programs because they throw it around so much and, they put up these big gaudy numbers, but, last year kind of took a step back a little bit, but they bring back a ton of guys. They got a receiver and a linebacker named Romaine Grant, who I really like. And we haven't even mentioned the team that I think is, at least right now, the team that has to be considered top 2 in the lower state is Cross. Cross has got Caden Ramsey, and you put that kid on a 1A football field. Let me rephrase that. You put that kid on just about any football field at the high school level, and he's going to be the most athletic guy in the field. He's also, 6'4", 220, and, plays offense, defense, helps out on special teams. So, I think in the lower state in 1A, that's probably who you have to look at. Lower state in 2A, I do think it's probably Barnwell, Philip Simmons. At this point, Hampton County is right there too. Those are probably the 3. But yeah, I think you guys are spot on. I think at least going into the season, what we can see on paper, which doesn't always matter, but it's a good talking point. I think on paper, I think both of those divisions are probably leaning toward the upper state a little bit. In Class 2A, the interesting thing will be when they finally release the brackets, because they're not public yet. I think I've got an idea of what they're going to look like in Class 2A, but until I see them, is how they do that floating region and which teams they assign to the lower state. Because here's the thing. I mean, you got a team like Andrew Jackson that's in Region 4. Let's just say, for the heck of it, that Andrew Jackson wins that region, but they are somehow assigned to the lower state. Now all of a sudden you got a team with a massive junior class of guys that are all, very, very recruitable, very, very good. They've got experience together. What happens if they put together a run? They're changing up how they do things a little bit there, but talent usually, has a pretty big say in it.
Ian, moving on to 3A, this will be year 4 for me covering, South Carolina football, and just kind of sad about it. 3A kind of got gutted. We'll say that. It's a smaller class. It kind of was the soft landing spot for those, 3 private schools in Greenville County that are in the high school league, and then some of the charters. But then there's some positives too. I mean, you look at the favorites here. You got BHP, obviously, with Marquise Henderson, one of the best players in the state. But there's a little bit more balance, I feel like, in this class, though. So I guess that's something to be excited about when it comes to the upper state, lower state dynamic, because you have the traditional Dillon, who is the powerhouse. Marlboro County is making a lot of waves. Oceanside, of course, is going to be a threat. And then Kevin's favorite team, I will say, in 3A is probably the Loris Lions. So what do you make of 3A going into the year?
I'm just going to tell you guys right now, I looked at Loris on Friday night and I put some vests on a couple of their guys. Man, this is, Horry County is my home, but it's also who I covered primarily, for years and years. And, I saw the ebbs and flows of Loris football from, going from, Jimmy Longerbeam to Jamie Snyder and, now Greg Mance. And, they always have this kind of roller coaster ride of talent. And I got to tell you right now, they're pretty close to the peak of what I've seen them. I mean, they've got guys who can move. They've got a first-year starting quarterback in Moon Jerel, who, they tried to get on the field last year, but they had a 2-year starting quarterback ahead of them. I mean, Moon's taken over now, and the other guys decided to concentrate on baseball. And, he's got a 6'2" receiver who also plays DB and, hit 19 miles an hour in a vest on Friday night in the span of about 15 yards. Stuff like that is just, it's cool data to talk about. But when you talk about, their defense, they got, I think 7 guys, maybe 6 on that side of the ball for Loris that are going into the 3rd year starting. That's pretty unheard of, at the high school level, just with natural turnover and things like that. Inside that region, though, obviously Dylan's Dylan. They're bringing back a kid who ran for 1,700 yards. They got to replace the quarterback situation. But, oh, by the way, here's a couple more 275-pound dudes that are going to be playing on the offensive line. I mean, they put something in the water out there. Marlboro County is a really interesting story because, all the new coaches and all the kids that came with them and, all this. I mean, you're not just talking about kids who wanted to keep playing for their coaches. You're talking about kids who wanted to do that, oh, by the way, have Division I commitments attached to them, or verbal offers or written offers, whatever it is. I mean, that's going to be really interesting because, it's kind of a coin flip when you have that big influx of transfers, whether or not it's going to work, whether you're going to have issues with guys meshing in the locker room, whether everybody can get in line with a playbook, so that region itself, we haven't even talked about Aner, which is about the most, I don't know the right word, but they're one of these teams that recently, just because of what they do with their offensive scheme and how they slow everything down. I mean, if you're expecting 5 possessions and you're playing Aner, you better expect 2, So they make a lot of unforced errors, or make their opponents make a lot of unforced errors just because they're scrambling. So, that's just one region in 3A. And if we can do that with just about every region, then I think that probably tells you, what I think about that. Yes, it's smaller. Yes, it's a little bit more tightly packed. But yes, there's also a little bit more parity too. Obviously, I think BHP is the team to beat overall. But just in the upper state, you're talking about Christchurch. You're talking about Chapman, and I know Broome lost their running back to a team that they're now sharing a region with. But there's just again, 3A is going to be really interesting just because of how new look it is.
With that being said, Ian, how do you think some of these new schools that are moving up on the charter side? I think we know what Oceanside is. We think the Land Sharks are really good. But then MVP, you mentioned Mountain View Prep a second ago with Jalen McGill there. What do you expect from them here in year 1?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have good days and bad days just because that's how new schools work. On Saturday they're playing Atlantic Collegiate, and I think you're going to see 2 very different sides of the coin. I just think because of the guys who decided to attend Mountain View Prep were probably a little bit more polished than the guys who decided to go to Atlantic. In a lot of ways, Atlantic is going to be very successful in sports not named football, probably sooner rather than later. But Mountain View, you put Jalen McGill on a 3A roster, and you're going to tell me that they're not automatically a top 7, 8, 9 team in the state, then you've probably been drinking too early in the morning. They're going to be good. How good, I don't know, because again, just like I said about Marlboro, you put that many new faces together in a locker room, you put them with new coaches, you put them in a new school. Let's not forget that these are 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. The world's coming at them fast. You can't just break it down on paper. Sometimes you just got to kind of let it, see how it plays out a little bit. I think, you have to kind of caution yourself not to call them a championship contender. I mean, could they get there? I mean, sure, I guess, but we got to kind of just see how things play out over the first few weeks and let them get through non-region play. You ask me again before they start the region play. I think I'll have a much better answer for you.
Moving on to 4A now, Ian, which is probably my favorite class this year. It just seems absolutely, loaded top to bottom. But the two teams that played for it last year are still there, and they both bring back a lot of talent in Westside and South Florence. So, do you think that we are heading for a rematch if you had to bet on that right now? Because I know there are a lot of other contenders out there, but is that still kind of, if you had to put money on it, that's where you're leaning at this point?
Would I take the field over those two making it? Probably.
Yeah.
Would I be surprised if they met again? Not in the least. I think that, Weaver and Bomar come into Westside, and you're going to have those guys. I mean, let's just forget that they play offense and that either one of them could be a 1,000-yard receiver with Cutter Woods.
Yeah.
What they can do on defense and special teams is really good. The fact that those two guys are now going to be in the defensive backfield, that they're going to be returning kickoffs and punts, that they're going to be able to, just schematically, that Brian is going to be able to blitz one of them off the edge if he needs to. I mean, you're talking about two guys that are committed to App State that, at times, and I know Trey Segarra is very, very good at Burns, but at times those two could really influence a game at Burns, and now you're going to have Cutter Woods throwing the ball to him. It just, again, it's on paper, but man, that's pretty special. You go right up the road a little bit and you got a Daniel team that's lost one game in 4 years, I think. Yeah, they replaced a Mr. Football finalist and all that, but they got a lot of people back too. I think you look at Camden that played for a state title last year. Camden is in a lot of ways very similar to Dillon, in that it's always like, where did this size come from? Like, what are you guys putting in the water out here? I mean, South Point. South Point. I mean, they're going to need a couple weeks. Their quarterback's out. He's still recovering from, surgery. But Cam McMillan, when he comes back, and you got Jazavion Currents that he's throwing the ball to, and, Jazavion's also one of the top-ranked defensive backs in the state. They got a really good running back, and that's just in the upper state. That Region 4 in the lower state, to me, is really interesting because obviously everybody knows a lot of what Gray's bringing back, but North Augusta is going to be good. Midland Valley isn't going to drop off completely. Are they going to, win the first 12, 13 games of the year? No. Brooklyn, Casey, Gilbert. I mean, Gilbert's got a sophomore running back who I think that if he didn't have to share the workload is probably a 2,000-yard guy this year. Airport. We already saw what year one of Shane Fiddler at Airport was going to mean for that program. You move over to Region 5 and you got South Florence. South's going to be good, guys. They're going to be good. Are they going to win the first 14 games of the year? Again, I don't know that, but they're going to be pretty good. I never rule out Hartsville. With that scheme and the way that they always seem to be developing the next set of tailbacks that can play in that split T. Hartsville's defense is going to be also as good as it's been in probably 7 or 8 years, if not longer. They're as healthy and they've got as many pieces. You go over to Region 6 and you got Buford and Bluffton and May River. I mean, whichever one of those teams, pops out of that region, is the number one seed. They're going to be in a position to win a game or two in the playoffs too. So, that division, that classification, to me is really interesting because, just because of some of those traditional 3A powers that are now part of it, joining some of those smaller ADM 4A teams from the past.
Looking at 5A here, I mean, it's going to be different. Hopefully we'll get an answer soon on how we're going to, do a playoff bracket and split this thing up and get it going. Obviously, you have names that you are going to talk about every year in Gaffney, Northwestern, Dutch Fork, but there's also some great stories with Irmo and I want to say Indian Land, Rock Hill with the new coach there. But specifically, I want to ask you before we actually get into favorites and do like we've been doing, I want to ask about like the talent level, the level of coaches, and just the overall improvement of the high school football down in the Charleston Low Country area over the last few years. Obviously Summerville's been a powerhouse for many decades, but there's just been so many new schools. There's been an influx of population, but it seems like in Charleston specifically there's been some really good football that's being played, and it's only getting better.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, I'm going to use Berkeley as an example. I know them very, very well. They go 6-6 last year. They lose to Summerville in the second round of the playoffs, and they return like 90% of their roster, which was a lot of young guys too. So you're talking about a team that won 6 games, brings back a quarterback who, threw for 2,300 yards and ran for another 500, I think it was, and put up a bunch of touchdowns. He's got his favorite targets back. The wide receiver room got better. The offensive line got better. The defense returned its, top tackle guy at middle linebacker. He's only sophomore. And Berkeley's not the best team in Charleston. Of those, 12, that cluster of 12 5A teams. I mean, there's so much talent. There's so much parity. And yes, I do still think that Summerville is the top dog of those 12 right now. But I think the gap closed a little bit. Fort Dorchester, they're a little smaller than maybe we've seen some of those powerhouse Fort D teams of the past. But they got some dudes. Ashley Ridge, everybody, now that Derek Sally's gone, I think that Ashley Ridge as a whole is going to be better. They were down a receiver last year because of injury, which was another, it kind of fed into the reasoning for feeding the ball to Derek so much. They've got a really good quarterback. They've got an awesome offensive line that looks like it could be playing, right now at the college level. I mean, these guys are huge. You go over to, a place like West Ashley where maybe they don't have that sheer size of Ashley Ridge and Summerville. But if you've ever followed a Donnie Kiefer team, that they're, you put those guys up, they're probably going to win just about every strength competition, because that's what Donnie instills in his guys. He's done it everywhere he's gone. And oh, by the way, they just happen to be returning, somewhere in the neighborhood of, 85, 90% of their starters, so that's pretty good. We haven't even talked about, the rest of Region 7. I mean, Stratford, what Denny is doing at Stratford it's pretty cool to watch, because this is a team that was kind of down on its luck and was just kind of a middle of the pack squad there for a little bit. Experienced offensive line, gritty running back, gritty quarterback, pretty good defense. Goose Creek, Malik McGowan. I mean, again, put that kid on in any football jersey and he's going to have an impact. So, those 12 Charleston teams, that's going to be fun to watch, just because most of them from 7 are playing 8 during the non-region play, so they don't have to travel very far. They're going to be playing in front of big crowds. The lights are going to be on. There's going to be a lot of excitement. And I just think that's a really cool dynamic of high school football in one of the biggest parts of the state. Is you also have all these teams that are, all within 30, 35 minutes of each other.
Let's stay on the coast, just move up a little bit north here, Ian, and talk about Region 6. We finally get the region with all the Horry County schools kind of put together there. What dynamic does that bring to that area, and just maybe even excitement, because you're all kind of – you don't have to worry about non-region scheduling. You know who you're playing. You got these guys lined up here right in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty open about it, and this is something we've been talking about for, 14, 15 years up here. And we talked about it when St. James, back in the day, filed the appeal to stay down in 3A when there was only 4 classes in the state, because they knew they wouldn't be able to compete, and the high school league approved it because it just worked out because of Myrtle and North Myrtle and stuff like that. But, it's really cool in the immediacy of it. I think having Carolina Forest and Myrtle Beach and North Myrtle Beach and Conway and Saukesty and St. James, all of them in the same region, I think it's really cool for October football. Long term, I don't know if it's going to be good for November football. And I really hope they prove me wrong. Mark Morris at Carolina Forest has turned some teams that nobody was thinking a whole lot of and made some awesome runs in the playoffs with him. And he's got a system in place and how he develops guys, and it's really cool to watch. And I bring up Mark and Carolina Forest because, I wonder what it's going to be like when that team hasn't had to travel, for a month and a half. And now all of a sudden they've got to go on the road in the second or third round. Or are things a little different? Are they not as prepared? Let's say that there's a year where four of those 6 teams are kind of down on talent level, and region play hasn't been as competitive and hasn't been as exciting. Are we going to see, that filter into the playoffs? This is something that Mickey Wilson and I have talked about a lot. Back in the day when Myrtle Beach was an absolute powerhouse in 3A, they would have to schedule every difficult non-region team they could because they knew that come region play, they were going to win 9 out of every 10 games in region, and it wasn't even going to be close. I remember them hanging 70 on people, and they weren't even trying. So, some of those years it was fine. Some of those years the non-region scheduling beefed them up enough, got them ready. What the iron sharpens iron thing that we're all hearing, over and over again this time of year. That's what I'm worried about long term with the beach region in 5A. And I hope it doesn't come to fruition. I hope they prove me wrong, but I feel like we've kind of seen this before.
So, one of the biggest things or reasons that Kevin and I and John, we got into, covering high school football independently is to shine a light on the kids, the players, the communities, but most importantly, the players. I want to talk about your role and how you help with the Combine Series across the state to shed light on, some of the great athletes that we have here. Can you just tell us what you do and, how that's been able to affect the lives, of these young men as they, chase their dreams of playing college football?
Yeah, I don't want to upsell my role because, I feel like I tell people all the time with what I'm doing between Prep Redzone, Catapult, and the Combines. Prep Redzone, when people ask me what it is and what makes us different, we're player-driven reporting. If a team goes out there and has 15 first downs in the first half, maybe we're not going to highlight that as much as the kid who had 9 of them. Okay, we want to put the spotlight on the kids. We want to help fight back at some of these market forces. Everybody wants to talk about the transfer portal and NIL and all this. Well, at the end of the day, we still have the next graduating class of high school seniors, just a few months away. And that's never going to change. We're always going to have that. And so this allows me to fight back. It allows me to lay my head on the pillow at night knowing that I did what I could. Look, I didn't play football. I played in 7th and 8th grade. So, yeah, I didn't play football. Okay. I had to learn this game from a different perspective, and that was as a reporter. Okay. With Prep Redzone, we have, when corporate told me that they were going to kind of give me the reins and let me do the way that I saw fit and that would work best for South Carolina, I went out and found newspaper guys because newspaper guys know how to grind. Newspaper guys know that staying up till 1 o'clock on a Friday night into Saturday morning is not a big deal because they've been doing it for years. You know what they're also doing? They're getting to games earlier. They're talking to coaches. They're talking to players. Okay. And I mentioned Prep Redzone first because when we started that in 2020, it was kind of an unknown. We didn't know. I had never ranked high school football players before. Okay. Well, then, I take the media director job with North South, and very quickly the conversation started about the Combines and what Neil Smith was able to kind of form with the combines, he started asking me to do more and more, who are guys that need to be here, when coaches don't nominate, because frankly, let's be honest, the coaches in the state are collectively awesome, but there's always a few guys who are they're not going to go out of their way. They're not going to do what needs to do to promote their kids. Let's take it out of their hands. Well, by working with Neil, then I got to be working, I got overtime, started working with this guy, JP Gunner, and I didn't know JP from Adam. And, JP and I got to talk, and he starts, just breaking down everything with Catapult Sports for me. And he's kind of explaining it to me. And this right here, and what a lot of people don't understand about our GPS vets now, JP hired, got me in line to be his replacement for the Carolinas when he got, promoted up, and now he's in charge of Texas. And this little device right here, this is our GPS, pod right there that goes inside that vest. All of this stuff together, from prep Redzone to Catapult to the combines, for me, it's all working in unison. For what I hope the outside world sees, I hope that they see that this is all about kids. This is all about putting them in the best position. Friday night, we put vest on 7 kids during the CMB Kickoff Classic, and the data has already been sent out to 250 plus colleges. That's from 7 kids from one event. And those are 2 20-minute scrimmages. Okay. I mention all that because at the combines, 150 kids per session, 2 sessions per day, 7 overall days. Okay. The numbers add up quick. Those are kids in South Carolina and North Carolina, thanks to what Neil did by expanding us into North Carolina. Those are a whole bunch of kids now that have raw data that college programs want to see. Fewer and fewer college programs every year are looking at timed 40s. They are looking for miles per hour. They are looking at acceleration, deceleration. They want to see how fast a kid starts and stops. Okay. Certain things mean different things. Okay. Certain aspects of raw data mean different things for different positions. A tackle, you're going to want to see different data than you are a center. Okay. Yes, they're both offensive linemen, but more and more college programs are looking at that raw data for how they recruit, for where they start, before they go ask for the kids' transcripts, before they go talk to the coach to see if the kid is a jackalope or if he's a great team player and if he's boosting people up in the locker room. Okay. All this data, everything, okay, started with this. It started with the combines. Okay. In South Carolina, that's how it went so big. Okay. JP and Neil and I work extremely close together, talk to JP almost every day, multiple times. We did 2 Zooms yesterday. Okay. Neil and I talk all the time. Okay. There is the groundwork has long since been laid where a kid doesn't have to worry about being hidden anymore. All these tweets that we see about being slept on and everything else. Okay. Let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it. You know what? Show up, put a vest on, go through the drills. Let's see what you can do against some of the other top players in the state, because that's what we've seen from year 1 to year 3 of the combines. Okay. The best players in the state are showing up because they recognize how vital it is. We got kids that are getting ready to commit to Power 5 schools. They already have the offers. They already know exactly where they want to go, and they're still showing up and getting that data. What does that tell you? It tells you that the data, it tells you that the groundwork of the combines and what's been built out of those. And yes, maybe, hopefully, every now and again, somebody recognizes that I played a role in it too. I'm not, my hands are on it. They're not the only ones on it, and I'm definitely not the one driving the bus. But like I said earlier, I can lay my head down on the pillow at night knowing that I did what I could to help kids combat the market forces.
That's awesome to hear. As a guy who grew up in South Carolina, I know that we've always had so many great athletes, so much great talent here. And sometimes, maybe it wasn't recognized because we didn't have the driving force to get that stuff out there. I feel like now what you guys are doing are doing a great job making sure these kids don't go overlooked and have a chance to continue playing if they want to at the next level. But, as we wrap up here, Ian, a question we ask all of our coaching friends when we have them on here. Jerel and I, big foodies. If we're traveling to a game, I know you're kind of focused down there in the Grand Strand PD area. what's a good spot down there that you recommend as a pregame meal? And then is there maybe one or two that you have, as your favorite across the state when you do go on some road trips?
All right, so I'm gonna put a caveat on here.
Okay.
I don't eat any more red meat. I don't eat chicken. I don't eat pork. Okay.
Okay.
I do eat seafood. Okay. I eat a lot of seafood, but honestly, the coaches around this state, if I've ever covered one of their games, they know this. I am notoriously early. Okay. I routinely walk into stadiums before security even gets there. Okay. I like getting there early. I find that coaches are very loose before a game. They've been tight all week, and they finally walk out on the field. They'll have real conversations with you. I've had heart to hearts, and I've heard about people's families and stuff. I tend to get a lot of a lot of veggie subs and stuff like that, just because I know I'm going to be sitting there for a while, so I need some carbs. Need a little bit of protein from the cheese, need some veggies, whatever. So I do a lot of Publix, hummus wraps, things like that. But if I've got some time, around here on the beach, I mean, the Marsh Walk and Murrells Inlet, especially if you're covering a game on the south end, you can get over there, 10 minutes from St. James High School, 15, 20 minutes from Sockasty. You're pretty close to Waccamaw. If you're over there, you get there early on a Friday, you can go get, pretty awesome bite to eat. There's a whole bunch of restaurants, a lot of awesome seafood. You probably don't want to go too heavy on it because it can sneak up on you. You're sitting in a press box and, but something like that's good. If you're more in the heart of Myrtle Beach, again, it's probably, there's a lot of really good Mexican restaurants. One of my favorite ones is Mexico Lindo on Kings Highway. It's like 30th and Kings, right around there. So, but yeah, when I'm traveling around the state, especially if I've been in the car all day, driving to wherever I need to be, the truck's comfortable. Don't get me wrong. And I love having Wi-Fi in my truck, but you can only spend so many hours in a car and then sit down and eat a huge meal and then go sit in a press box. So it is a lot of quick sandwiches, veggie wraps, a lot of hummus, any way I can sneak into some protein. So, and I know you're probably going to ask me something else, but before I stop, Jerel, I just got to ask you right now, that Tom Knotts is going to bring up the fact that you listed Dutch Fork third, right? Earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. In
yeah.
5A, you listed Tom Knotts and Dutch Fork third. It's going to be on a bulletin board now. Why? Why feed the beast, Jerel?
That's not even my intention. We're just going through all of the schools. I'm not saying he can, if he wants to, and if he's plugged in enough, he can go ahead and see where we have continuously picked his team to win the state title preseason, during the season. He can even pull up last year when they started winning games later in the year where we were like, Dutch Fork's coming. Dutch Fork's coming. We've been beating the drum. So, yeah. That's a rookie mistake.
Tommy's found a way to get a live feed of this. He's watching this right now.
he's got it up in the meeting room right now for the kids to see it.
Yeah. Showing all of his guys how they were disrespected.
Oh, I hate that. Yeah. Now I feel terrible. Yeah, didn't mean that. No disrespect to Dutch Fork, perennial, state title winners. It feels like, but yeah, no disrespect. I was just reading a list. But I have to ask you, Ian, you kind of blew up one of my questions. It also tied into food there. You mentioned that you're not eating red meat, chicken, or pork anymore. I'm a huge barbecue guy. I got really excited when you said you were from Kansas. My wife is also from the Midwest. She's from Missouri. So I was going to ask you to kind of spark a little bit more controversy since I'm going to have Silver Fox fans on me. I was going to ask you to go back in the memory bank. What do you like better, Kansas City barbecue or the good old SC barbecue, if you can remember that far back?
You trying to get me stabbed?
I'm not. That's not even it.
Let's put it this way: the meat thing with me is a relatively new development, and part of it was having a gallbladder removed. Part of it was giving up meat for Lent, and then just having a struggle going back, and how my body feels after not eating meat versus eating meat. And not to get TMI for you guys, but again, this is like 3 years. Okay, that means I had 42 years of straight carnivore status. Okay. Oklahoma Joe's, now known as Kansas City Joe's in Kansas City. I mean, I'll tell you what, I'll put that little gas station up against just about anything. And, my wife's from Texas, And 3 of the last 5 times I have eaten meat or Texas barbecue is at a place called Bartley's. Texas barbecue and Kansas City barbecue, the two sides like to say that they're a whole lot different. They're pretty similar. Bartley's is so good that one of my labs is named Bartley. Now, is it messed up to name your dog after your favorite barbecue joint? I don't know, but that's where we're at, So, look, I'm sorry, South Carolina. It's not even close. I'm going to put, Kansas City 1, Texas is 1A. After that, to me, it never even really mattered. And look, I went down to Rodney Scott's a couple times and it was good. It was really good, but again, it was pork barbecue. The sauce made it. It was delicious and I would highly recommend it. But as somebody who grew up on brisket, that's where the buck stops. It's all about the brisket.
Well, Ian, before we let you go, obviously you guys have tons going on there with Prep Redzone and with Catapult. Can you plug maybe some of your stuff you got coming out here soon? People should really be on the lookout for on social media and on your website as well.
Yeah, and we've got all 7 of us will be out at games on Friday night. A couple of the guys will be covering Saturday night games as well. Next Wednesday, the 28th, we will be releasing our 2026 rankings update. Got somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 new players that we've evaluated. We'll have movement up and down, and then every 2 Wednesdays after that, we'll do 2027, and then we'll release our initial 2028. Obviously, again, with me having my hand in the Prep Redzone, Catapult, and Combine cookie jars, we have access to information that a lot of folks don't. But at the end of the day, it comes down to us getting out there. Seeing as many players and teams as humanly possible. I mean, between 6 of us, Jed Blackwell was out on Friday night with, some of his day job stuff, but with 6 of us, we saw 46 teams at Jamborees last Friday. That's just, look, it's a numbers game, and in a lot of ways, Prep Redzone is winning it. We just have the staff that most outlets don't have, and we've got a lot of newspaper guys who know how to hustle. They still get to scale back a little bit versus what they had to do. But by comparison, I wouldn't trade this team for anything because they're absolutely awesome. I'm looking forward to, week 0. I know people hate saying week 0, but I'm looking forward to games kicking off. I'm looking forward to having, something real to talk about. I think it's going to be really exciting here. And I think, seeing how the multipliers and the new classifications work out, I think it's going to be awesome. I think it's going to be something to talk about every single day, right up until, the last state championship game.
Well, this has been great. I want everyone to go check out Ian and the team at Prep Redzone on social media. They do a great job there. Like I mentioned, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Keep it more at Movin Chains. Movin Chains brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union. Jerel, anything else for Ian before we let him go today?
Ian, thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate it. When I started covering football here a couple of years ago, you were one of the first follows I had, because we had to cover the entire state, and there's so many reporters and journalists that have kind of suffered from, how newspaper has evolved. And you mentioned your staff being a bunch of newspaper guys. For someone who grew up on Saturdays, the first thing I did was going to get a box score and see what happened the following Friday night. You guys and girls who cover the sports, especially high school sports, don't get enough credit, especially from that traditional role. So it's really cool to see the evolution of your career and where you've been able to take it with Prep Redzone, Catapult, and the Combine Series. Even though you threw me under the bus with Tom Knotts and Dutch Fork fans across the state, I'm going to come to your defense. Like I said, my wife's from Missouri. I've eaten at Oklahoma Joe's. Fantastic. Kansas City barbecue is a treat. Does not get talked about enough. It is fantastic. I'm partial to South Carolina, though. I'm going to win back the fans there. South Carolina barbecue is always going to be number 1 in my heart because I love this state so much. But to end that, just thank you so much for your time and really appreciated the conversation today.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate everything you do. Look, just like with the Greer Sports Star that launched 2 nights ago, the more high school coverage we get in the state, the better. Okay. I'm not one of these old school guys that hates competition. I want more. I want you guys to keep kicking butt. I want everybody who's doing it right now to be doing this until the end of time, because this makes us all better, makes us strive to be better, and what you guys do plays a huge role in that. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that, Ian. And in case Coach Knotts, wonders, I do have Dutch Fort #1, so just make sure to get that out there as well. But Ian, we appreciate you, man. Look forward to hopefully seeing you in a ball game here soon and catching up. All right.
All right, guys. Have a great day.